Here on the table, we have the GFX 100S. If you notice here, this camera is incredibly similar to this one right here, and that's because this is the new GFX 50s Mark II. If you're looking at the cameras, they're pretty much identical. The only big difference that you can see is the badge that is on the side of the camera. One just says GFX and the other one says GFX 50s Mark II. So this camera is capable of shooting 3 frames per second in its high mode, which is not very much. So quite honestly, this is not directed towards people who are shooting sports. This camera is primarily marketed towards people who are shooting landscapes, portraits, and just some snapshots, really. This camera does not have phase detection autofocus like the GFX 100S. This is very similar to the GFX 50R, where you only get the contrast-based autofocus system. Now, from my experience shooting this camera, it's adequate. It's not super fast, but it's definitely fast enough. Now, you're not gonna be able to go out and really do any sports photography with this, I feel like. Just because of the limitations of the autofocus. One upside of this camera versus the GFX 50R is that this camera does actually have IBIS built in, and that's huge. So you actually get 6.5 stops of image stabilization. So the image stabilization doesn't just help the video sides of things, it also helps the stills. And when you're doing the low shutter speed handheld shots, having the IBIS really does make a difference. This camera is weather sealed, so you can take it out into the elements and not really have to worry about it too much. This does, like the GFX 100S, this does take the same battery as the Fujifilm X-T4. So that is really cool to see, because that means that these batteries are going to be more interchangeable going forward. Using this battery, you can expect to get 440 shots, which is a little less than the GFX 100S, which is rated for 460. So, like I said, it's identical to the GFX 100S, and the ports on the side here, you have a microphone jack, a headphone jack, USB-C, which can also double to charge the camera, which is phenomenal. I love that option. And there's also a micro HDMI, and you also get an old school sync port for any flash work that you may want to do. And over here on this other side, you do have a remote connector as well. One interesting to note with this camera is, just like the GFX 50R, there is no 4K recording on this camera. You are maxed out at 1080/30. So for the most part, the internals of this camera are very similar, if not pretty close to identical, that I can see for the GFX 50R. You get the same 51.4 megapixel CMOS sensor. You get the X Pro processor 4. So the 3.69 million dot EVF is quite large, and it looks really good when you're looking through it. I have no complaints about the EVF personally. As my time shooting it over at the Living Desert, it was nice. It was very nice to use. It was bright. I didn't have to worry about the sun coming in and kind of interfering with me being able to see the EVF. So just like other Fujifilm cameras, the screen does articulate quite nicely. So as you can see, we can pull it out and go like that. And it does have quite a bit of range. And then, just like the other Fujifilm cameras, you can hit this little release, and now it goes for a nice vertical. So just like the GFX 100S, you do get a 3.2 inch screen, which comes in at about 2.3 million dots. And I gotta say, it's a really nice experience to use. My only downside, I have to say, is the fact that you cannot touch the menu, which I think nowadays we should be able to do that. And the Fujifilm menu system would be a nice one to use a touchscreen on, I feel like. So this camera is gonna come in body only for $3,999, which for medium format, we're getting into some really not that expensive territory for cameras. If you do want this with the new 35-70 kit lens that they are going to be releasing as well, the price on that is going to be $44.99 with the lens. So the Fujifilm GFX 50s Mark II is the same exterior as the 100S, and what you're getting with that is a really nice small size. This is way smaller than the original 50s. And that's huge. I really do like the ergonomics of this camera. Walking around the zoo, it felt easy to hold and very nice to grip. It never felt really heavy, to be honest. The ergonomics of the camera are quite nice. Like I mentioned earlier, it never really felt that heavy when I shot with the 30 or the 120 macro. The grip on it is very nice, very solid. You do have the little switch up on the top to switch between stills and movie. I find that a little interesting given that the movie features are not that spec'd out in this camera, that they still left that in. Just like the other GFX cameras, you can press this button right here and it'll actually toggle the backlight on the e-ink display on the top. You do get the nice little joystick back here so you can move around easily, and that also does double as your focus point selector. Well, if you're interested in picking up one of these cameras, you can head over to camerawest.com and place your pre-orders. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button.